I'm Chris from All Things Good and Nerdy, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
On episode 122 of Better Podcasting, we pause from podcasting for a moment to have that much-needed money conversation.
Or do we really pause? In this week's Better Podcasting Download, we talk about pausing and resuming your podcast listening.
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we have another pod poll result for you.
Lauren, I'd say start the show now, but you should pause it instead.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your hosts for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome to episode 122 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me, of course, is the man, the myth, the legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., Stargate Pioneer.
That is correct. One of the podcasts that I do is called Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's about the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show on ABC in its 5th season and the Marvel comic universe in general, including the 18, soon to be 19 Marvel Cinematic Universe feature films. It's been a fun run over there, but we're having fun over here on Better Podcasting because we're talking about hobby podcasting like I do on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Absolutely. Now, usually we tease Gonna Geek Network related things towards the middle or the end of the show, but I got to start off with the elephant in the room for the video viewers. This week on the GonnaGeek.com show, that was a fun episode for me because I did a little bit of a mystery debut that actually spills over to this very show. That's right. In episode 231 of the GonnaGeek.com show, which you can check out at geeks.link/231. That's geeks.link/231. I debuted a custom microphone flag that I received as a birthday gift from my brother. It lights up. It even pulses. It is just absolutely incredible. And I have to say that it was quite a surprise. And it's a really neat, geeky thing. We've talked about the microphone flags before. And it's just like, oh, wow, now I have like a one-of-a-kind custom mic flag, all because my brother's also a geek. So you never know what sort of birthday gifts you might get when you're a podcaster.
And you have some pretty handy family members. I feel outdone, actually. Your brother outdid me, as I would expect that he would do because, well, he's the better of the two brothers that we had on Gonna Geek this week. But that is amazing. That mic flag is amazing. I'm like, wow, I'm still looking at it right now, and it's lighted, it's animated, and I can't believe he did that. That is amazing. And if he maybe wants to make some for the rest of the network, we might actually pay. Just hanging that out there for your brother.
Yeah, you know what? The shipping to the US from Canada would be like $300, I'm sure. So it's probably cheaper to fly him down to make it. But seriously, if you want to check this out, you can go ahead and see that at betterpodcasting.com/122 if you want, or head over and see the full. If you're into 3D printing or anything, you can check that out at geeks.link/231, or just go over to GonnaGeek.com and you'll see that there. So there you go. I got myself a new podcast edition, and I'm talking about it before our gear arc at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it again at the end of the year, Gear Arc, but this costs you nothing. This is except for all the hard times you gave your brother over the years. This costs you nothing. You're going to have to be nice to him now.
I know. That's probably why he did it. But let's go ahead and move on to our topic. Okay, SP, I gotta drop the curtain here for a minute and say that when you came to me with this idea, because this was your idea, it was one of those ones that was like, whoa, this is a little bit stepping outside of our comfort zone, but it fits so incredibly well as a hobby podcaster. So SP, what do we have going on today?
At the top of the show, we kind of joked a little bit about pausing our podcasting. So we're going to take a minute to pause our talk about podcasting, and we're going to talk about some things behind the podcasting. And basically, we're going to talk about financial management. Now, why is this important? It's important because it's time for us to have that difficult money talk, and everybody has to have it at some point in their life. And yes, this discussion is more than podcasting, but it does include podcasting. So you have to just hang with us throughout this whole time. So this is a discussion about your personal finances. Neither Stephen nor myself are financial experts, by no means. We're just two normal family guys who have full-time jobs, and we podcast for a hobby. We don't make any money off of this. We actually spend a lot of money for this. This is simply a hobby for us. This is fun for us. We feel fortunate to be able to podcast this way. Unfortunately, though, along the way, we've run into so many people that want to start podcasting or have just started podcasting specifically to make money. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. Often you have events that have transpired in your life, and you get to just desperate times, and they've heard or read a lot of places incorrectly, if you ask me, that you can earn a lot of money from podcasting really quickly. And as we've said before on this show, this just isn't the case that we've experienced or acknowledged, even with high value podcasts that are really taking off. It takes some time. It's not an overnight sensation.
And if you're new to podcasting, I'll let you in on the trade secret. A lot of times you'll hear the joke that people podcast without pants. The reason behind that is because they literally had to sell their pants to afford their bills.
Their internet so they could keep on podcasting. That's totally not true, but it's a funny thing. Yes. This is one of the many really reasons, by the way, that we released episode number 78 of Better Podcasting, titled The Cruel Realities of Starting a Podcast. And as I mentioned, starting a blockbuster podcast from nothing, from absolutely nothing, in 1 to 3 months to something successful, making money is so rarely achieved that we, at the time that we released that episode, number 78, and we still believe it today, that we needed to publish that information in Better Podcasting. So if you want to hear about the realities and the expectations of actually starting a podcast, go back to episode 78 and listen to us talking about that. But looking a little bit further back from the reasons why you want to start a podcast, the reasons why that might have caused you to need a get-rich-quick scheme, you need to look into the reason that possibly you might not have the best financial plan in the world. Yes, other things happen in life, but maybe it could be because you don't have a financial plan and you found yourself in a situation where you need a lot of money. So emergencies and bad luck can and does happen. Heck, it's happened to me a lot just in 2018. For those that are not familiar with what's been going on in my life, there's actually a lot that's been going on in my life. I've referenced it before. One of the things that happened this year is my basement started leaking out of nowhere. It's a relatively new house, like 15 years old, and the basement started leaking. I wasn't the only one. A lot of people had the same issue. We had a really unusual spring, winter that just caused a lot of hydrostatic pressure. But this was an unplanned expense. I needed to take care of it, either myself or have somebody come in. So emergencies happen and bad luck happens. We understand that. So it's not all because you're bad at managing money, but it could be. So we want to give you some tips on how to do that correctly. There are steps that you can take to keep yourself afloat in those times, and you can move ahead as best as you can. And that includes a financial plan. A financial plan, by the way, can help your podcasting too, by the way. So this is the link into podcasting. So if you have the money and the time to devote to podcasting, you're not working that second or third job, and you can maintain your creative energy into your podcast, and you can devote some organization to your podcast and some promotion, then you can devote a lot more to your passion project, your hobby podcast, and you can make that podcast happen. So yeah, it does relate to podcasting. We're not going to focus on podcast budgeting right now. That we talked about in Better Podcasting episode number 20, 21, and 23. That was podcast budgets. It was a 3-part arc that we did, starting a podcast, sustaining the podcast, and shutting it down. So if you want to know more about specifics into podcast budgeting, we have those episodes available for you. But in this episode, we're going to go over some financial and budgeting tips that we have used in our lives. And we are not professionals. We are not experts. Said that before. We're going to say it again. I just want to qualify this whole discussion. So if you have any comments or you have any tips yourselves on the subject, if you're listening to this and you want to chime in, please, we hope that as you listen to this, if you have something to say to add to this conversation, that you'll let us know, and we'll talk about it in a future episode in listener feedback.
It's just such an important part, though, when you do have a hobby and something like a podcasting hobby where it does take your time, that you got to look at all of your financial plan and whatnot. And that's why we wanted to do it, because as SP mentioned, we have seen a lot of people who come into it for the wrong reason, or they start and they quickly realize that they can't afford it. So that's why we really wanted to mention that. Now, the first tenet of personal finance we'll talk about is to live within your means. Obviously, creating a budget is going to help you do this. You want to make sure to list out everything that you devote money to on a monthly or annual basis. The best way to do this is to track things over 3 months, maybe over 6 months, and also at a year. So then you can look at things as far as how they average out. If you make sure that you account for everything by doing this, you want to track your spending, and that will help you make sure that you don't miss a single thing. And this will also give you a good idea of what you need in order to live, and then make adjustments based on real data, which, hey, guess what? Eventually that will lead you to that podcasting budget, which again, episodes 20 through 23, as SP mentioned.
Financial plans are not static. They are continually moving. So yeah, tracking your spending is a continuous process, but to come up with that initial budget, you just throw something down on paper and then you track it and then you modify it as things go on. So just take care and keep it going and be patient as you go along. So we're going to go over some things that you might want to include in your budget. This is by no means an all-inclusive list, but it'll help you frame your budget as you're creating it. Now, you can make this budget on a piece of paper. You can make it in a program like Excel or Google Sheets. You can make it wherever. The point is to write it down somewhere or type it in somewhere, save it, and refer back to it as you're going through your bills throughout the month, throughout the year. The first thing is housing. Whether you're staying with your parents, whether you're renting, whether you're actually paying a mortgage on a property, this is a big thing. It's the first thing that you should be paying, because if you don't have a place to live, there's a lot of things that you need to take stock of in your life. This does happen to people, by the way. I mean, there was a lot of foreclosures that happened a few years ago. So it's something to keep in mind of, yeah, this could happen. But if you maintain a steady income coming in, your budget for housing or rent should be somewhere, and these aren't firm percentages, but they should be about 25 to 35% of your actual take-home pay, what you can actually use, your net, basically. So yeah, this is a guideline, and we're going to give you several guidelines. But if you keep in that 30% plus or minus 5% for housing or rent, you're probably doing a decent job of staying within a grander big budget. Could it be less? If you could get away with less, that would be awesome. Could it be more? Might be eating into other things. And it does depend on how big your budget is. Like if you're making $1 million a year in US dollars, that's different than making $100,000. And it's different than making $10,000. So you have to take all that into consideration as well.
And if you're like SP and I, we put up backdrops so that you can't see that we actually live under the bridge in our local communities. So that's where we reduce our budget there. We just hide the fact that we're podcasting from under a bridge.
It's incredible the noise gates that we're able to obtain because under a bridge is actually kind of noisy. So we've done a good job of gating that out. Okay, we're going to move on. So food bills, whether it's groceries, whether it's restaurants, it's your food. It's the nutritionist intake that you need to sustain yourself. I've seen anywhere from 10 to 15% as recommended of your actual income that you will spend on food. Again, this is just a guideline. This is just to give you an idea of how much you should be spending in the grocery store, depending on how much money that you have coming in. The next item that I'm going to talk about is insurance bills. I don't really have a percent for this, but it's something that you should consider, that you should look at to actually put into your budget. A lot of states in the United States, I don't know about different countries, require you, if you have a car, to have car insurance. So if you have a car, not everybody does, I realize, but if you have a car, you have to pay for a car insurance. So you have to look into that. What are the minimum coverages and what are recommended coverages? So talk to your insurance agent about that, but make sure you're budgeting for that. Renter's insurance, if you rent. Homeowner's insurance is mandatory if you're paying a mortgage. A personal property, if you have some expensive stuff, like if your podcast studio has expensive stuff, if you have an expensive home theater system, if you have expensive jewelry, if you have expensive appliances, this is all personal property that is above and beyond your homeowner's or renter's insurance that you should probably get actually insured. Medical insurance. If you're in the United States, you probably need medical insurance because you could end up in the hospital at some point in time. You could end up with a podcasting injury and you'll have to go to the doctor, to the emergency room, to urgent care and have that taken care of. And medical insurance will be able to negotiate a lower payment. First of all, a lot of people don't realize that. When you have medical insurance in the United States, they actually negotiate, this is the minimum value that we're willing to pay, and that you will accept it. And they'll go, yes, we'll accept it. So they might not pay that value, that total value, but they'll pay their portion of it, and then you'll pay your portion of it rather than paying their higher price that they actually charge.
Sorry, I was just hurting myself because I'm in Canada and I could just go do it for free.
Because I was just going to mention, other countries have different medical systems. Like Canada has free healthcare, and I put free in quotes because you do have to pay deductibles and stuff like that up in Canada. But yeah, and life insurance too. If you're a family person, a young family person, and you're thinking about your spouse, you're thinking about your kids and how you can provide for them if you're no longer there, life insurance is something that you should look into. I'm not going to recommend any specific coverage there. Talk to an insurance agent on that. But there you go. Those are insurance. Okay. So now you've got your housing taken care of, your food, and you've considered insurance. Probably time to pay the utilities, because unless you're living off the grid, like Heather Welsh does over at Sunshine and Power Cuts, you're probably paying an electric bill in order to podcast. You're probably paying a gas bill if you're heating with gas. Not everybody does. And you're probably have some sort of cable or streaming subscriptions for entertainment. I'll lump that in here. It could be considered entertainment, but I'll throw that into utilities because a lot of people consider their internet and their cable bill as a standard utility. All of this should be around 10%. And if you are living off the grid, you better be budgeting to maintain that system that you have. So usually people budget about 10%. That's not living off the grid. I don't know exactly how much you should budget for living off the grid. For that, you should probably ask Heather Welsh. She might have a good idea for you. I mentioned before, if you have a car, you should have car insurance. Well, guess what? You're going to have maintenance costs on that. You're going to have operating costs on that. You're going to have repairs. You're going to have oil changes. You're going to have to put gas, petrol, fuel, something in there. Even if it's an electric car, you're going to have to make sure you're budgeting for that electric. And granted, it's probably going to be a lot cheaper than gas, but it's still extra electric coming into your house. So you should budget for all of that as well. We already mentioned medical insurance, but healthcare is a different sort of actual thing that a budget item that you should put into your budget. If you have copays, I mentioned those before, copays, but prescriptions, even if it's just a copay, you should budget for something like that. Annual dentist and vision appointments cost money. And even if you have supplemental insurance in the United States, odds are you'll end up paying a little to your optometrist or your dentist to get those annual checkups. So you need to either budget that or just be able to absorb that in your monthly budget when you actually do get those. I mentioned before urgent care or emergency care. Yeah, the emergencies happen. And if you have to pay for that care, you should budget for those emergencies. If you receive what we term as homeopathic care or natural care, like chiropractic care or massages, you should actually budget for that. And I've heard from multiple people that even in Canada, and I don't know about the rest of the world, but there are some expenses not covered by your medical system.
Yeah, I made the joke earlier so that I could do the payoff now, where then I eat crow and I admit a little bit that, there are even medical expenses that you do have to pay in Canada. So, it's not all sunshine and roses up here all the time. I like to point that out whenever I talk about any financial with anybody that has an American base, just because there are things that we as Canadians also have to budget for that aren't fully covered. For example, like if you need to go to the eye doctor or something like that, absolutely, that's generally not covered. So it is something that even this Canadian has to budget for, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, another thing that you're going to have to budget for is personal care. What we're talking about. We're talking about haircuts. We're talking about laundry or dry cleaning. If you happen to be a professional at work, maybe you do need to actually get your clothes dry cleaned. If you have to buy clothing, most people do actually have to buy clothing, whether you're a geek and you're buying geeky jerseys or whether you work in a professional environment and you need a suit and tie or a nice dress, pantsuit, whatever. This is stuff that you're going to have to buy. So you're going to have to budget for it. And I will throw this in here because this is where I do gifts. So if you have a coworker that's celebrating something, you might want to bring them something. If you have a family member that's having a birthday or an anniversary, you might want to budget to make sure that you have money at that point in time every month, because these things happen month in, month out. And sometimes there's more in 1 month. We'll get to that in a second. But gifts are something that you actually have to budget for because they do happen all the time.
It's like I gave SP a gift when he finally remembered his name. I was like, wow, big accomplishment, SP. Way to go. Here's a gift.
Remembering my name is an issue from time to time. Sometimes I call myself Steven. Sometimes I call myself Chris. Sometimes I call myself Lauren. So yeah, and when I actually say SP, that's hitting it on the head. So personal care is actually something that you should try to constrain. This is something that could get out of hand. So a lot of people say it's somewhere between 5 and 15% of your income. And this covers like soaps, nail polish, whatever you need, cologne, shaving, utensils, or whatever you call it, shaving things that you need to shave, or beard trimmers, as we do on the Gonna Geek Network. Entertainment. This is something that, again, if you don't budget for this, this could run really rampant. And a lot of people say it should be about 5%, less than 5%, probably no more than 5%. If it's more than 5%, you probably should really look at your entire budget and what you're spending on, and if you can afford more than 5%. This could be movies. This could be eating out. This could be actually buying alcohol or anything that you do for fun, really. If you have a hobby, if you like to go hiking, if you like to go skiing, that should all fit within there. And then some people have an extra category for actual fitness. So about 5% for that too. Because even if you just run, you're going to buy a new pair of running shoes every 3 months, 3 to 6 months, probably more like 3 months, because that's about when they run out and wear out. That was a little joke that I try to make there. And that's about 5% too. All right. We talked about emergencies before. Now we're going to talk about an emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund, you probably should start one. And this is in case something catastrophic happens, like you lose your job, or you have a major expense, like your house burns down, or your car, which is brand new, gets wrecked and your insurance doesn't cover the whole thing. So this emergency fund, I've heard you should have somewhere between 6 and 18 months worth of net income in there. So say you make $100,000 in a month, or in a year, excuse me. That's what you make. but there's taxes on top of that, and there's other things on top of that. So your take-home pay is a lot less than that. Let's just say it's $80,000. So if you want to budget for a year of living expenses, you're going to need $80,000, maybe a little less because you cut down on entertainment and stuff like that. But this is something that you need to build up over time, and you need to throw in a special savings account for that. Other things that you should probably start saving for, if you're in the market for a house, you should probably start saving for a down payment. In the United States, I can't say for other countries, but in the United States, it's a good rule of thumb to have about 20% of the payment on the house in cash that you can actually put towards the purchase. And this gets into a lot of insurance thing, a lot of mortgage companies that kind of demand 20%. So if you want a bigger house, you're going to have bigger down payment. If you want to have a smaller down payment, you're probably going to have to spend less on the house. So a house.
The weird thing about Canada, by the way, is that actually the down payment for the house is lumped in with the grocery bill, because when you go through the till, you just ask for a block of ice just to build the igloo. So that's all it is. It's just part of the grocery bill.
Why not? You know, it's
live in an igloo. That's what we do up here.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of something I can say about snowflakes, but I'm not going to. Okay. Podcasting gear. If you want more expensive podcasting gear, you should probably save up for that. And you can do that through actually establishing a savings account for that and throwing a little bit every month into that. So some say that you should save about 10% of your income every month for those issues, for those savings. So just keep those in mind. If you happen to be in the market for education, if you happen to need certifications for your job, or if you want to go to college to increase your knowledge base and get ahead in your job career field, maybe you want to get some postgraduate education. Maybe you want to go to trade school. Maybe you want to become just a better cook. And as a hobby, you want to go to culinary school. If you need any of this to include continuing education for your existing job, maybe stuff that you have to pay for on your own, because some people have to do that. Or maybe you have kids and you want to throw money into a college fund. Depending on where you are in the world, saving for college in advance is always a bonus. It's not always achievable, but if you can get out of college with no debt, then you are ahead of the game. Like I said, not always possible, but this is something that you should consider. And then if you're older like me and you have a lot of gray in your beard, you're going to start looking at retirement. Saving for retirement really starts when you take home your first paycheck. You should be putting something in a savings account or a retirement account at some point in time when you get each check. So this is something to take advantage of. There are tax breaks in the United States. I can't speak for other countries, but you have companies that will give you matching to a certain percent, whether that's 5%, 3%, 15%. It's free money, folks. So you should try to take advantage of those matching employer retirement plans if you can. And finally, what are your goals in life? Do you want a dream vacation home? Do you want a boat? Is there a particular sports car that you want? Is there maybe a sailboat in somebody's future? Yeah, you should probably save up for those, and you should have a life plan for those. And yes, in some of those cases, you can use retirement savings in order to do that here in America. But this is something that you should sit down with a financial planner and actually plan out the game plan to get from point A to point B, or at least do enough research that you're familiar with how to get from point A to point B, because point B just doesn't happen out of thin air. You have to plan for it. You have to get there. You're not going to win the lottery. If you do, congratulations. Doesn't happen to everybody. And you're not going to go to the casino and have that big poker hand. It just don't depend on it. It's just not a good life plan, in my opinion.
But if you do, please remember SP wants that custom mic flag. Okay, just please remember him. And I also I want a second one just so I can have two and he can have one. You mentioned SP doing research, which also brings perfectly into our next point, which is knowing when to call the experts in. Because this is all well and good to talk about it, do your research and everything like that. And if you've been trying to get your finances under control for a while, well, that might be the situation where it's time to consult someone who is an expert. As we mentioned before, we are not financial planners, not financial experts. We're just a couple of guys that like to talk into a microphone. So we're not financial experts, but you might at some point need to actually bring somebody in. It could be a situation where maybe you have something that's really complicated that's come up and you want to make sure that you maximize some of those savings opportunities that SP mentioned. Maybe you have multiple rental properties or you run a business and you have some expenses. Maybe that's time to get an accountant because they'll know all of the ways that those things play together, because there might be a benefit to some things being part of your business and other things being part of your personal life. Experts will vary from reason to reason, but in North America, there was a lot of changes that were made to credit laws and things like that during the recession in the 2000s. And a lot of these experts do know how those will impact you if you are in a less than fortunate financial state right now and you've been trying to get it under control for a while. There may be some advantages. So it's all well and good to do the research, but you definitely want to know there might be time to bring in a professional.
Indeed, I have brought in a professional several times in my life, and I'm glad I did. And there's some times that I just couldn't afford either the time or the money that it would take. And I did a lot of research on my own, and I got from here to there. The internet's been a great thing. I mean, there's a lot of things that are available on the internet. There's also a lot of things available on the internet that might not actually fit your specific situation. So just be wary of what you're reading online and make sure that you're asking yourself the question, does this fit what I need? A few helpful hints here on financial planning. What are your financial goals? We didn't even cover that at the beginning. Probably should have, but I wanted to get to the budgeting portion of this first. So the financial goals actually guide your budget. If you want to retire earlier, for instance, you're going to have to save more money up front. And if you're okay with working later, then you can save less. So this depends on how much other money is available from month to month. So it does depend on what your financial goals are. Another thing, make sure you pay yourself first. You know, that 10% that we recommended for savings, make sure you just take that out of your paycheck and it's automatically deposited into another account, a savings account or an investment account or something like that. Make sure that you pay yourself first, because if you don't, you're going to eat into that every month to, I really need this, or that microphone looks great. I really need that microphone. Well, in another 6 months, when you really need that new car, that $600 that you spent on that great microphone and compressor might have been better used on the down payment on the car in 6 months. So just keep those in mind.
Which, to clarify, when you're talking about the $600 microphone, you're talking about the MXL 770, right?
I am, and I'm talking about. No, I'm not. I was actually thinking in terms like a Shure SM7B and a compressor set. But in some cases, you can actually look at your entertainment. If you're looking for places where you can actually pull more money in, and you'd be a little savvy, and you look at your entertainment budget and you go, you know what? If I actually devote all my entertainment time to maybe learning about stocks, I can start saving that 5% on my entertainment for 3 months, and I can build up a starter stock fund. I can look at penny stocks. I can look at actually blue chip stocks and what I can and can't afford. And that could be fun for me for a while, just learning about stocks. Well, yeah, you can do that. Another thing is make sure you're preparing for your taxes. Yeah. In the United States, I can't speak for other countries, but in the United States, if you don't have anything being taken out of your paycheck, or if you don't save money out of your commissions, at the end of the year, when it's time to pay your taxes the next April, you're going to be hurting for money to pay those taxes. And Uncle Sam wants their money. And I'm sure it's similar in other countries. I can't speak for the time of the year or whatever, but just make sure that you're budgeting to make sure you're paying your taxes, or you're having the proper amount withdrawn automatically from your paycheck that is going to pay the government. This is important, and we've talked about this before in terms of podcasting, but it does apply to other aspects of your life. Never put something on a credit card that you can do without. I talked about that microphone upgrade that we were talking about earlier. Let's just say $600 for podcast gear. Yeah, if you can wait to save up for that, you're going to be ahead of the game because you're not going to be paying that 15 to 20% interest on a credit card. That adds up over time. And if you really want to see some horror stories on that, I can direct you to some horror stories of people that didn't know that that credit card actually needed to be paid back with interest. They thought, it's just coming out of my account. They thought it was a debit account, and debit and a credit card are two different things. A debit card actually takes money from your checking or savings account. A credit card is actually something you have to pay back every month. And if you don't pay it back, it's basically a loan. You have to pay interest on that, which is a higher interest than you can get from like a bank or a credit union. So these are things that you need to consider. And if you can do without that item for a little bit, it's best not to put it on a credit card. So if you do have credit cards, you should probably pay off higher interest debt first. Like if you have a credit card that you receive some special financing on, like 5% financing, 2%, whatever it is, leave that go for the minimum payment and pay off that 15%, that 20, that 25, that 30% card first, because that interest will eat you up. There are apps and websites and programs that can help you with planning. If you have to wrap your head around money, but you can't afford a financial planner, we can direct you in some places, but I would encourage you to search the internet as well, because there's always some new issues coming out, some new apps, some new software that you can actually leverage. So pay attention to that. I've done all my own stuff for quite some time, so I'm kind of out of the area, but I have heard that Mint, if you're just starting out, there's this program called Mint. You might want to look into that as a starting point anyway. Let me give you a little bit of my experience and what's worked for me and what hasn't. I've been saving since I've been 7, but you can start anytime. I don't care if you're 50, 60, I don't care if you're 20. Start saving as soon as you get the chance, because it's going to actually benefit you in your entire life. If you can find a way, I talked about this before. I actually came out of college without college debt. I'm amazed at that, but I did. I had some college savings and I got some scholarships. So I was actually able to get out of college without college debt. So I never fell into that trap of having to pay off student debt. I've heard that that is a horrible experience. I've heard that it is could be a long experience, especially if you're a lawyer or a doctor. So you can look into that. I haven't always bought the best thing. If you pay attention to the Gonna Geek Network, I've held on to my phone for 2 or 3 years. I don't buy the newest computer if I can help it. I don't buy the top end microphone. I would love to have an Electro Voice RE20. At some point I will, but I'm saving up for it and I'll get to there. If you can leverage 0% financing on major appliances, on cars or something like that, I would. This is important, and I wanted to get to this all along. So I talked about gifts on a monthly basis. Well, the holidays come around once a year, and it's a big budget time because you have to buy for a lot of people generally, if you know a lot of people or if you have a lot of family. Now, some families just do an exchange with one person, so on and so forth. But if you have friends that exchange, this could add up. Start a Christmas savings account. Now, banks used to have specific Christmas savings account. They don't anymore, but you can start just a normal savings account. Put a little bit of money into it every paycheck. By the time the November 1st, October 1st, I use October 1st, by the way. If October 1st comes around, I pull out most of that money and it's available for Christmas. Vacations. There's another thing. You should probably be, if you're taking a vacation, you should save up for it every year and do the same thing. Create a vacation savings account. That way you're not just paying off that credit card after you go away for 2 weeks for the next 9 months. So that is some hints. I've learned some DIY on my repairs. We talked about it before, car repairs, home repairs. I've done that. If you can do that, that'd be great. And the last thing is big life events do happen. If you have daughters, you're going to have to pay for a wedding. I guarantee it. If you are in the market for a significant other spouse, you're probably going to need that engagement ring. So save up for that.
And SP's engagement ring that I gave him was very expensive.
Yeah, I demand a lot because, it's life is short and I need that $20,000 ring. Thank you very much. That's why Steven can't afford a new mic flag, by the way, and he has to have his brother make one for him. And then graduation presents. Graduations happens once in a lifetime. High school, college, medical school. law school, whatever, save up for those because, some people give really expensive gifts for that, and you're probably going to want to save up for those as well. So that's my experience and my recommendations.
Yeah, I think they're solid recommendations. Now, I'm in a different part in my life than Mr. Pioneer here. There's a slight age gap between the two of us, about 30, 40 years. And that's a joke. I still try to follow some of these points, like trying to allocate money differently and whatnot. So when I do have expenses, I can end up just pulling from that allocation. For example, my power bill is billed on an every other month cycle. So every month I have a certain amount that gets allocated. So then when that big Canadian winter bill comes, I've got it sitting there ready to go, and I'm not looking in my account going, oh, look, I have all this money sitting here. What am I going to do with it? I should spend it on 3D prints of SP. Instead, then the bill will come and I'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have bought those 3D prints of SP. So it's good to do that sort of thing, even if it is just to do with a bill. I will let you know as well that peace of mind is another way that I've tried to apply to my financial plan. And for example, I have had the fortune of actually buying a new car, maybe some 0% financing there that SP mentioned. And we ended up buying the extended warranty because us, family with a couple of kids that are so young, the prospect of spending tons of money on a brand new car when part pricing is volatile for new vehicles, it was just worth getting the extended insurance. And the fun fact on that is I actually had a vehicle that we had to have repaired many times out of the standard warranty. And if it wasn't for that extended warranty, we probably would have had a great amount of difficulty trying to pay for that. So that's another thing to look at, is a lot of people knock on things like that, but it depends on your life. Is it worth spending it for the peace of mind for that what if scenario? And on the note of DIY, SP has mentioned this a few times on the podcast. You never know what you can DIY. And to bring it all back to podcasting, I will share one of my favorite DIY projects. Yes, I've done a custom closet organizer. Yes, I've built a custom headboard for my son, but I built myself a rack mount for my podcast gear. And this was something that saved me easily about $100, because if I was to have bought it, I would have had to pay at least $100 more. And I hadn't done anything like it before, but I Googled some images, went and just sort of figured it out. And you never know when that DIY is going to come in handy. And it might even come in handy with your podcast endeavors directly, such as my rack that I built.
If I have to recommend one place to go to start learning about financial planning and making smart monetary decisions, if you've ever heard of Clark Howard, he is at the clark.com website. I would recommend that at least to start from, and then you can expand from there. So if this is all new to you, and really this is why we're doing it, because if you happen to be listening to this podcast and you've never done any financial planning before or never thought of it, then we want you to at least start thinking about it, because it'll make your podcasting journey all that more enjoyable. And once again, that website is clark.com. There's a lot of different things that are available there. Okay, we know that this segment has been different from everything else that we've done. This is more than just podcasting advice. This is life advice. However, good financial decisions in your life can be made at any stage in the game and will actually help you with your hobby, whatever that is, in this case, podcasting. So you won't be stressed over buying too much gear or not enough gear, or how to pay for that media hosting that you have every month. And you know how you're going to make that happen every month. Plus, you're not going to feel like you have to make money with your podcast within 3 months, or else. We've actually run into people like that, and God bless them for trying, but there's no certainty there. There's no certainty in life, but I think podcasting right now is more volatile than anything else. So we just wanted to make sure that you had a solid foundation, a financial foundation to work from, and we've hoped that this has helped. Now, did we mention that we are not experts? We are not financial planners.
No, we didn't mention that. We didn't mention it at all. No.
Well, good thing that we're mentioning now. We are not experts in financial planning. We are not bankers. We are not investment brokers. We're not. We're just two guys happen to have families that have gotten this far in life based on the knowledge that we had. And we wanted to share that with you because we've been able to use those basis, that financial basis, in order to create our hobby podcasts. So we know that a lot of people out there listening, as I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, you have your own advice, you have your own recommendations. That's great. We want to get those recommendations and we want to share it with the rest of the audience. So please feel free to get in contact with us and we will talk about it in a future show. You can always email us, podcast@betterpodcasting.com. On Twitter, we're @BetterPod. And you can always catch Stephen over on Facebook with our Better Podcasting Facebook page, which Stephen tells me a lot of you actually have over the course of the last couple of weeks. So that's awesome.
It's true.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
This is a fun one to talk about today because it's something that actually more so affects podcast listeners, which of course indirectly affects you as a podcast creator. Overcast recently announced that their app has added a new smart resume feature and a couple of other things. They announced this through a blog post, and essentially the smart resume is going to make it a little bit easier to resume the podcast that you've paused. The smart resume is two key features. Number one, it jumps back by a couple of seconds after you've paused the podcast that you're listening to, which is supposed to help you remember the conversation that was being had, because you might have paused it, gone to work, and then come back and started playing again. I do that a lot myself. How about you, SB?
Do it all the time. Most of my podcast listening that I do for just my personal enjoyment happens in the car. And my car trips are rarely longer than 15, 20 minutes these days. And that's not enough to actually get through all the podcasts that I'm listening to. So while there are times that I have those driveway moments that I get to work or I get home and I just listen to the rest of the podcast, most of the time I actually have to get out and go do something. So then when I restart the podcast, I have trouble remembering exactly where it is. And I'll often back it up a minute or two on the spin dial on the iPod Classic in order to remember where I was.
The second part of the smart resume is that it actually adjusts the resume a little bit and tries to fall within silences between spoken words when reasonably possible. That's what they say. So that's interesting to see. I wonder how their algorithm works, but it makes sense. Why start in the middle of a sentence or middle of a word when you can start it before the word? So I thought that was a really neat thing that they're doing. And the fact that they're changing the resume or giving you the option of a smart resume shows that a lot of people are pausing podcasts partway through. And it makes sense because we've seen that sort of with the average length of podcasts shifting within the last couple of years, but through all of these stats. The other thing that has been updated with Overcast is that they've updated it so that the auto delete option can remove episodes 24 hours after completion. Before, the auto delete feature was limited to episodes upon completion or not at all. So what this means is that it's just going to delete in a smoother manner and one that makes more sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, because there's some times where either you fall asleep or you leave your device playing, you have to run off to a meeting, or you have to get out of the car and do something. You come back and you're like, wow, what did I miss? And the podcast has actually ended that you were listening to. So this allows you to actually go home maybe and like spend a night and then get back into the car in the morning. And you're like, oh, I can actually listen to this in the morning. I love this. So by the way, Overcast has that smart silent feature to begin with where it will compress the silence. I mean, it's an option that you can turn on and off. It can compress the silence, which I don't have on, by the way, because usually the podcasts that I listen to are pretty produced to the point where if there is a silence, there's a reason for that silence. So I don't like those compressed, but it does have that available. So I'm not surprised about this pause and silence feature in the first place.
And the last feature that Overcast added was, speaking of money, if you've got one of those password protected feeds from your for your Patreon subscribers, there's now support for password protected podcast feeds. So Overcast is supporting that now. And this is something that if the feed works based off of a username and password via the basic authorization for HTTP, you'll be able to do that now, which is good because I know there are some out there, and if that's the thing, let's make sure that we support that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was just having a discussion the other day on Reddit about this, and I didn't know the specifics about it because I don't have a password protected RSS feed, but I do realize there's reasons for it. If you want to maintain the security of where the information goes for whatever reason, either for a paid option or maybe you just want to limit it to a small group for whatever reason, could be a prayer group, right? Could be a group that is like a mastermind group or something like that. So I could see this. I know Elsie Escobar over at Libsyn has mentioned that she has a private podcast feed, but I don't know if it's password protected. So I do like this. And by the way, Overcast is probably my predominant method of listening to podcasts on my phone. When I actually do that, I don't use the podcast app. And I know a lot of people have transitioned over to Overcast. It seems to be a more versatile and powerful app for most people. And I definitely have enjoyed using it. I do have an iOS device. Steven does not have a mobile iOS device that he uses on a day-to-day basis.
No, I used to, though, be an Apple user, and I think Overcast was one that I used way in the early days, but Overcast for sure, from what I've seen, would be what I'd be using if I was an iPhone or an iOS user. But I wish that they had an Android version, because it's really good from what I've seen. So if you use Overcast or you're thinking about it, maybe these are a couple of things that will help you end up actually making that switch over towards Overcast. So there you go.
Indeed. You know what, Steven? I think it's time to move on to some Podback.
All right, so in the Podback today, we had Digital Soup, which can be found at The Digital Soup. They had said, another great episode of At Better Pod this week. Thanks for the shout out regarding segues and our fun with hashtag SegBlock on our shows. So if you're not familiar with that, well, you should go back and listen to the back catalog of Better Podcasting. We also had Mike Howard at JPEG to Raw say, I was looking at the behind the scenes gear and want to see more. Now, what is this a reference to? This is a reference to last episode. If you don't watch the video show, I actually partway through kicked my feet up on the desk, ignored SP, and took a selfie. And I posted that selfie itself, to which there was a bunch of conversation that happened. We also had Suncast from the GFQ network. He had responded saying that he was looking for a bald spot. So you could see the back of my head and everything on the camera. So he was looking for the bald spot, which is not existent. There's a couple of...
Oh man.
So there's a gap. If you go back and you want to take a look at, there's a little bit of a gap from when I fell and cracked my head open. It's a scar. It's not a bald spot. There's a difference. I've had it a very long
keep
time.
Telling yourself that. Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't turn around and take any more pictures from behind in the future if I were you.
Also, we had one from Museum Hour that said, if you have more resources for podcasting you found helpful, share them by replying to this last tweet so others can find them easily. Oh.
And then at Ines Allison, who is from the Myth Take podcast, said, At Better Pod is a fun and very useful podcast. So thank you very much, Allison. That was great to be lumped into all the other resources that I saw in the reply thread. That was amazing. And also, we got another thanks from, you want to say it together this time?
Aurelia
Pod. Said, thanks to at Stargate Pioneer of at Better Pod, letting me know it was on sale. The hashtag Aurelia family welcomes its first at Blue microphones Encore 100. This was one of two mics in this tier I wanted to try out, the other being a Shure SM58. Well, fortunately, we've already done that for you in our GonnaGeek.com/shootout that we accomplished a couple of years ago. Actually, Steven accomplished. So if you want to hear that, we actually have that already. But those are two microphones that were on our radar. I'm so glad you did. By the way, right now, you can get that Encore 100 for $59 on Amazon.com. And it is a good microphone. Matter of fact, it is usually the primary microphone that I recommend to people that don't need a near indestructible microphone. That, of course, would go to the Shure SM58. But I like the sound. If you're just going to use it in a studio and on a stand, I like the sound of the Blue Encore 100 better. and you can find that right now on Amazon for really dirt cheap.
Yeah.
$59 for that. That's amazing for the sound quality you get out of that.
Fun fact, I actually seriously have been thinking that I should do an episode of this show just on the Encore 100, just because it's the one microphone that I really like the overall sound with, and not enough to do it on a weekly basis, but I've been thinking about it for a bit that I should just do one episode on it.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I could probably do the same thing with the Sennheiser E9, not the 8. We don't recommend the 8, but the E935 and the Shure 100. That would be an interesting episode. Now, the Sennheiser E935 is a higher price class, and if you take into the sales price of the Blue Encore 100, it's $100 difference between the two microphones. So you would expect hopefully a higher quality, but I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to do. So maybe we should do that sometime, Stephen. If you move on into the tweets, we had a tweet from @AgeOfJacksonPod said, "It has come to my attention that my audio quality may not be great. Is this happening to other people?" And @DiamiPlocky said, "I think it's pretty good. Listen to @BetterPod for more info on how to make it great."
Well, thank you very much for that, Diami. And we also, to wrap up our feedback, posted a poll and we said, which operating system do you use to produce your podcast? In last place, we had a two-way tie between mobile OS and other brackets like Linux, which was a 4%. In runner-up place, we had 16% with Mac OS, and that leaves 76%, which was saying on the wonderful OS2 Warp. Oh, sorry, that said Windows. 76% said Windows.
Yeah, so if you want to get back to us, if you use Mac OS or if you use something else to produce your show on, we would be interested in hearing that. I think it's a little bit closer than what is represented in this poll. Ran it for about a day and a half, 76% Windows and 16% Mac OS. I think that's actually closer in the pod space based on what I'm hearing, what I'm getting through feedback from everybody, even asking questions either on Reddit or Twitter or in different places. So yeah, I would enjoy replying back to that tweet on our Twitter feed @BetterPod and just saying what you use. And we'll get back to everybody next week and see if we get more Mac OS responses.
Absolutely. So there you go. That's going to take us to the end of the show. Before we do conclude, I will recap that we are able to be viewed on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time. If you'd like to watch us stream live, errors and all, you can find us at www.geeks.live. And we had a couple of people, we had actually quite a few people come by, and a couple of people that I wanted to give a shout out to with their comments. We had Johnny Pennington send us an email, and he said, unexpected costs, dental, plumbing, Hurricane Harvey, and prostate operation. I know, yeah. And we also had Emily Prokop, which this is very relevant, said there are also a ton of podcasts out there to help people with finances and giving hints about saving, paying off debt, investing, etc. My husband just paid off his student loans because of tips I've been picking up listening to podcasts. So there you go. Who would have thought that you could get financial advice on a podcast?
Yeah, you get for what you pay for, first of all, right? So you have to qualify the people that you're listening to. But if you have a specific podcast that you would recommend, please let us know what the name of it is and why you would recommend it. Like maybe it's devoted towards paying off student debt, or maybe it's devoted towards retirement, that sort of thing. So just want to make sure that we qualify it before we send people off in different ways. But if you have a podcast that you would recommend, we would definitely think about giving it out to our audience next time.
Oh, by the way, did we mention that we're not financial experts? I don't know if we mentioned that.
Ooh, I don't think we did.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yep. So we are not financial experts. We don't work in any financial field, and we are just two guys that manage money or our wives manage money. Let's be honest. Our wives manage money on a monthly basis.
I don't have money. I don't work. So for episode 122 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen John Drew. Seriously, if you're not watching the video, betterpodcasting.com, you can see my awesome microphone flag.
And I'm SP saying, I still need a new mic flag, dude, from the Christmas special. Where is it?
Nowhere. Bye!
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.